Salt sea, the tears of Portugal are of your salt. How many mothers and daughters have been left alone so that you could be ours, O sea? Fishermen fight for survival every day. They fight nature for their daily bread. Zoyo, from the ship, high sea, I marvel at your greatness. It's your wildness which tears me into the depths. I will flee the world on your bosom. The mists come, I am in despair. I wish to flee from this faint-hearted world into the velvet world of your tenderness. Gentle sea, you will devour me. In a deadly embrace, I will be yours. In the bullfight, the challenge to the elements becomes a festival. Victory over the bull symbolizes dominion over nature. Zoyo the bullfighter, your voice challenges my life, stifles my cries, which are born in the depths of misery. The man of the future will not flee the elements, he will conquer them. His house is no longer a refuge of the fearful, but earth is his habitation. Rudolph Schindler, the architect and pupil of Otto Wagner, was born in Vienna in 1887. In 1913, he emigrated to America.
Good night, Vienna.
He worked for several years until 1921 for Frank Lloyd Wright, whose spatial architecture and formal language had fascinated him ever since he was a student. He supervised for Wright the building of the residence for Miss Elaine Barnsdall on Olive Hill, Los Angeles. Essential drawings for this are by Schindler, while Wright was responsible for the monumental pre-Columbian style. In 1921, Schindler made himself independent. He built his residence in Los Angeles in North Kings Road. You don't think of a house when you penetrate behind the bamboo bushes into this little private jungle of hedges and old trees. The site in West Hollywood was only 33 by 16 meters. The flexible plan offers numerous ways of using space. The private home of this Austrian architect became the prototype of hundreds of thousands of Californian patio houses. There was a sunken garden at the feet of the house. In a rhythm of staggered pavilions and patios, this Japanese-style house presents itself on a gently rising hill. Transparency, by means of narrow, horizontal, clear-story windows, sliding canvas panels opening inside rooms to the outside, and views of nature framed like pictures. This transparency was one of Schindler's principal concerns. Like many intellectuals of the period, Schindler preferred to live among nature, protected by walls as far as the need for shelter demanded. The sleeping places on the roof, open on all sides and covered only on top, were turned into so-called sleeping baskets by the subsequent addition of side walls. Schindler had been constantly in contact with Neutra, a friend from student days. He helped him when he came to the United States. David Gebhardt has written, Schindler's magnus opus of the 20s, if not of his total architecture, was his beach house for P.M. Lovell, Newport Beach, 1925-26. The Lovell Beach House stands along with Neutra's Lovell House of 1929, Gropius's Bauhaus, Dessau, 1925-6, Le Corbusier's Villa Savoie, Poissy, 1929-30, and Mies van der Rohe's German Pavilion at the Barcelona Exhibition, 1929, as one of the monuments of 20th century architecture. In fact, in contrast to these other buildings, it is the only one which comes at all close to fulfilling the ideas of the international style as set forth in 1932 by Hitchcock and Johnson. Professor Lungner of Dresden has described Neutra's Lovell House as inconceivable without Schindler's. Schindler's house is dominated by sharp rectangular forms and 5 visible concrete frames forming the space of the building. The projecting balconies guarantee protection from the sun on the ocean side.
Now is the time to say farewell, good night, Vienna. Now lovers kiss beneath your linden trees. The world is waiting on the edge of the day, just waiting to say good night.
The architect Richard Neutra was born in Vienna in 1892. In 1925, he came to Los Angeles and worked with Schindler. David Gebhardt, who with Esther McCoy and the Viennese architect Hans Hollein was largely responsible for research into Schindler, considers Schindler and Neutra's competition entry for the Palace of the League of Nations in Geneva a successful example of mutual inspiration and true collaboration. McCoy describes its projecting balconies as typical Schindler. According to Gebhardt, the valuable partnership of the two architects was overshadowed by Neutra's quick contact with the media. Asked about the final break between the two men, Gebhard says it was a logical development for Neutra to win the commission for Lovell's townhouse. Lovell had felt uncomfortable with Schindler while the beach house was being built, and Neutra at that time was the only acceptable representative of the style Lovell liked. Schindler's houses still fit into the Californian landscape, but in the architectural trends of today, there is not a trace of Neutra or Schindler. In his biography, Neutra wrote, "It is almost incredible that I succeeded so quickly in having the Health House put up, a building which remained utterly unorthodox as a whole in its basic philosophy and in many other respects. Visible from afar, it rested on a steeply falling slope, with the towering mountains of Griffith Park behind it, and a broad view to the south, down to the distant sea over trees in the foreground. The Health House attempted to recreate a home for people out of what had been our natural environment for 100,000 years, by merging exteriors and interiors, and by fluid penetration of the landscape in a manner still rare in 1929. Everything technical served the same. I thought that a suspension structure would save material. A minimum of set-back, slim rolled steel supports carried steel roof beams on which the upper stories, of far larger surface area, hung by means of narrow braces of minimal cross-section. Here, for the first time in a residential building, exposed bar grate supports were used. This was almost unknown until then. I was able to lay all piping and wiring through them in any direction, even diagonally, and so save money. Everything was precisely calculated and checked, almost to a fraction of a millimeter, because even the standard steel window frames fitted exactly into the original frame. But for me, all that was not the main point. It was of little importance, although it emphasized the basic thought of this building pattern. In 1931, in Los Angeles, Richard Neutra built his psychotope, or anchorage for the soul, on a tiny site measuring 18 by 36 meters, with economy. Aker von Mervelt wrote in Die Zeit, "It was a unique feeling to penetrate this quiet but busy house through a towering rose hedge from lively Silver Lake Boulevard. Even at night, light would be shining. Projects for America, Europe, Africa and Asia were worked on here by assistants from many countries. The building had long ago become the prototype for the modern house, period." Neutra had used the materials of our age, which until then had been timidly avoided. concrete, plastics, aluminium, and glass. He played with mirrors to make rooms look bigger and to bring in nature. Neutra made his name as a technician with the house. He was said to have made the Industrial Revolution visible for generations. Until then, such tentative attempts had been known only in glass factories. Neutra himself eventually lived in 10 square meters with 3 phones and an intercom. Suddenly, no one knows how, a fire broke out on one of those cool Californian nights while the owner was away on a lecture tour. In 2 hours, it annihilated one of the documents of modern architecture.